What if the man you loved, the father of your unborn child, saw you not as a person, but as a commodity, a temporary vessel for an heir he planned to steal the moment they were born? Imagine discovering this devastating truth by accident, hidden in the shadows of a skyscraper after everyone else had gone home. This is the story of a young woman who fled a gilded cage to save herself and her child, a journey that would test her spirit in ways she never could have imagined. Prepare yourself for a story of shocking betrayal and the incredible resilience of the human heart. Chloe was a small-town girl with big city dreams. Armed with a degree in linguistics and a flawless command of Italian, she had moved to New York City, determined to make her mark. After months of rejections, she landed a dream job at Vance Global Strategies, a prestigious import-export firm. Her boss, the impossibly handsome and charismatic Julian Vance, took an immediate interest in her. He was brilliant, sophisticated, and made her feel like the only person in the world. Within months, their professional relationship blossomed into a whirlwind romance. He told her he was separated from his wife, a socialite named Serena who lived in Europe. Chloe believed him. She was in love, and for the first time, she saw a future filled with happiness, partnership, and soon, a family. She had been halfway to her Queen's 2000, a sleek, modern building with a glass facade and a rooftop garden. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped out into the lobby, a wave of excitement washing over her. She had been halfway to her Queen's apartment when the sickening realization hit her. Her work laptop was still on her desk, unlocked. With a sigh, she had turned around. The night security guard, a kind man named Frank, buzzed her through with a familiar nod. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was silent, a stark metal box ascending into the heart of the sleeping giant. When the doors opened, the office was dark, save for the ambient glow of the city lights, painting long, distorted shapes across the polished floors. A single sliver of light, however, escaped from under the door of Julian's corner office. She was surprised he was still here. As she quietly made her way to her cubicle, her heels clicking softly on the marble, she heard his voice. It was low and intimate, the tone he used only with her. A soft smile touched her lips. Maybe she could surprise him. But as she drew closer to his office, the door slightly ajar, the words she heard made her freeze. The blood in her veins turned to ice. "Serena, darling, you have to be patient," Julian was saying, his voice a smooth purr of conspiracy. "Yes, she's definitely pregnant. The test was positive." Chloe's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. He was talking about her, but why was he telling Serena? He had said they were practically divorced, that their marriage was just a business arrangement. A cold dread began to creep up her spine, wrapping its tendrils around her heart. "Of course she wants a wedding," Julian chuckled, a sound that was suddenly devoid of all its former warmth. It was a cold, cruel sound that made the hairs on her arms stand up. "I'll stall. I'll play the part of the devoted lover for as long as I have to. We need to corner her, make it so she has no choice but to give us the child." Chloe felt the world tilt on its axis. Give them the child? Us! The words echoed in the cavernous empty office, each one a hammer blow to her soul. She cautiously peeked through the narrow gap in the door. Julian was lounging in his leather chair, his expensive shoes propped up on his mahogany desk, staring at the glittering skyline as if he owned it. He was a king in his castle, and she had just discovered she was nothing more than a pawn in his twisted game. "Think of it, Serena. No more failed IVF cycles, no more invasive procedures. A real, healthy child, and it will be mine. Ours." The possessiveness in his voice was terrifying. He wasn't talking about a baby. He was talking about a possession, an asset to be acquired. The love he had shown her, the tender words, the shared dreams. It was all an act, a performance designed to secure an heir. She felt a wave of nausea so powerful she had to grip the wall to keep from collapsing. She had been a project, a means to an end, an incubator. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. She had to get out. Now. before he saw her, before this nightmare became her prison. Without a backward glance at her forgotten laptop, Chloe turned and fled. She didn't dare use the elevator, her frantic footsteps echoing in the cavernous emergency stairwell as she descended floor after agonizing floor. Each step was a frantic beat in a rhythm of pure terror. The city lights, once a symbol of her dreams, now seemed menacing, the eyes of a million strangers watching her desperate escape. She burst out of a side door onto a darkened alley, the smell of garbage and damp concrete filling her lungs. She ran without direction, her only goal to put as much distance as possible between herself and that monstrous tower. Back in her tiny apartment, the familiar space felt alien and unsafe. She moved on autopilot, throwing clothes, documents, and the little cash she had into a worn duffel bag. Her hands shook uncontrollably. The next day, her world shrank to the four walls of her apartment. She ignored the incessant buzzing of her phone, knowing it was Julian playing the part of the concerned lover. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Her mind was a whirlwind of betrayal and fear. What was she going to do? Where could she go? Late in the afternoon, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed from her door. It wasn't Julian's knock. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she peered through the peephole. A tall, impeccably dressed blonde stood in the hallway, her expression a mask of cold indifference. It was Serena Vance, the woman who was supposed to be in Paris, the woman who was Julian's co-conspirator. Before Chloe could even decide what to do, Serena spoke, her voice cutting through the cheap wood of the door. "I know you're in there, dear. Let's not make this more unpleasant than it has to be." Swallowing her fear, Chloe unlatched the door. Serena swept past her without an invitation, her expensive perfume instantly overwhelming the small space. She surveyed the modest apartment with a look of undisguised contempt. "So this is where you live," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I can offer you much better accommodations. For the duration of your condition." The threat was unspoken, but hung heavy in the air. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a command. "I know everything," Serena continued, turning to face Chloe, her blue eyes as cold as chips of ice. "I knew about you from the beginning. In fact, it was my idea. Julian needed a simple, healthy girl to carry our child, and your file from HR was perfect. Naive, no family to speak of, desperate for money. You were the ideal candidate." Chloe stared at her, speechless. The sheer audacity, the calculated cruelty of their plan was beyond comprehension. "Our child," Chloe finally whispered, her voice trembling. "This is my child," Serena laughed, a short, sharp sound with no humour in it. "Don't be a fool. You are a vessel. You will carry the baby to term in a comfortable apartment I provide, with the best medical care. After you give birth, you will be compensated generously. A new apartment, a fund that will set you up for life. You'll sign the papers and you will disappear." "Get out," Chloe said, her voice quiet but firm, fueled by a surge of protective rage for the tiny life inside her. "Get out of my home!" Serena's smile vanished. "You think you have a choice? We will ruin you. You'll be fired, blacklisted. You won't find a job in this city again. How will you raise a child with no money, no home? We know all about your past, your alcoholic mother, the stepfather you ran from. You have nowhere to go. Be smart, Chloe. Accept the offer." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Chloe trembling in the sudden silence. Serena was right about one thing. She had nowhere to go. Except away, far away. Her plan formed in a flash of desperate clarity. She grabbed her pre-packed duffel bag, scrambled out the fire escape, and melted into the anonymous chaos of the city streets, heading for the one place that promised a way out: Penn Station. The cavernous hall of Penn Station was a symphony of chaos, announcements echoing, wheels rumbling, a sea of faces surging in every direction. For Chloe, it was a sanctuary. Here she was just another anonymous traveller, a ghost in the machine. She used her last $100 to buy a one-way ticket on the first Amtrak train heading west, its destination a vague point on the map called Chicago. It didn't matter where she was going, only that she was leaving. As she found her seat by a grimy window, the city she once loved looked like a cage of glittering steel and glass. The train lurched forward and with a final, shuddering sigh, began to pull away from the platform, severing her last tie to the life she thought she knew. Hours bled into one another, as the urban sprawl of the East Coast slowly gave way to the rolling hills and endless fields of the American heartland. Chloe stared out the window, but she didn't see the changing landscape. She saw Julian's face, twisted by his cruel laughter. She saw Serena's icy glare. Tears streamed silently down her face, a quiet testament to her shattered heart. She must have been a pitiful sight, because an elderly woman sitting across the aisle leaned forward, a look of gentle concern on her wrinkled face. "Rough day, honey?" the woman asked, her voice warm and raspy. "My name's Martha. How about some coffee? Got a whole thermos of it right here." Chloe, who had been bottling up her terror and grief for days, found herself nodding. There was something in Martha's kind eyes that felt safe. As the older woman poured a steaming cup of coffee, the story tumbled out of Chloe, a torrent of whispered words, of love and betrayal, of a stolen dream and a terrifying future. Martha listened patiently, her expression never changing from one of deep compassion. She didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions. She just listened. When Chloe finally fell silent, exhausted and emotionally drained, Martha simply patted her hand. "Well, that's a whole mess of trouble," she said calmly. "But you're strong, and you're not alone now." That night, as the train rattled through the darkness of rural Pennsylvania, Chloe was jolted awake by a sharp, cramping pain in her abdomen. A wave of panic, colder and more terrifying than anything she had felt before, washed over her. She stumbled to the tiny, swaying bathroom, and when she saw the blood, a raw, animalistic cry escaped her lips. Her baby, the one thing she was fighting for, the one reason she had run, was slipping away. Martha found her moments later, collapsed on the floor, and immediately took charge, her calm demeanour a rock in Chloe's storm of grief. She alerted the conductor, and at the next small town, an ambulance was waiting. In a sterile, unfamiliar hospital, a tired-looking doctor confirmed her worst fears. The stress, the trauma, she had lost the baby. Lying in that hospital bed, Chloe felt a profound emptiness, a hollow ache where hope used to be. The future she had been running towards had vanished. She had nothing left. When she was discharged, Martha was there waiting for her. "You're coming home with me," she stated, not as a question, but as a fact. Chloe was too broken to argue. Martha lived in a small, quiet town in Ohio, a world away from the relentless pace of New York. Her home was modest but filled with warmth, the scent of baking bread, and the quiet comfort of a life lived simply. For the first time in months, Chloe felt a flicker of peace. The world outside didn't exist here. There were no skyscrapers, no lies, no threats. There was only the rustling of leaves and the kindness of a stranger. A few days later, Martha's nephew came by to fix a leaky faucet. His name was Leo. He was a tall, quiet man, with kind eyes and hands that were calloused from hard work. He ran a small farm on the outskirts of town. He didn't ask Chloe any questions about her past. He saw the sadness in her eyes and simply offered her a gentle smile and a quiet presence. He would bring by fresh vegetables from his garden, or leave a carton of eggs on the porch. These small acts of kindness were a balm to Chloe's wounded soul. Slowly, cautiously, she began to heal. The nightmares became less frequent. The crushing weight of grief began to lift, replaced by a fragile sense of hope. Over the next year, Chloe and Leo's friendship blossomed into a deep, abiding love. It wasn't the dizzying, whirlwind romance she'd had with Julian. It was slow, steady, and real, built on a foundation of shared quiet moments and mutual respect. He showed her the beauty in a simple life, in the turning of the seasons, in the satisfaction of a day's hard work. In Leo, she found a man whose heart was as good and true as the land he worked. They married in a simple ceremony in Martha's backyard, surrounded by a small group of friends. For the first time since leaving New York, Chloe felt truly happy. She had found a home, not in a place, but in a person. Life was good, but there was one piece missing. They both longed for a child. Years passed, and their dream of starting a family remained unfulfilled. Doctors could find no reason, offering only frustrating uncertainty. The pain of her miscarriage, long dormant, resurfaced with a sharp pang of regret and longing. It was Martha who suggested they consider adoption. "There are so many children who need a good home," she said one evening, "and you two have so much love to give." The idea took root. After navigating the complex and emotional labyrinth of the foster care system, they were introduced to a small, quiet 2-year-old boy named Noah. He had been found neglected, his past a story of heartbreak they were determined to rewrite. Noah was their son. From the moment he entered their home, it was as if he had always been there. He was a sweet, thoughtful child who slowly blossomed under their love and care. He filled their lives with a joy they had never thought possible. Their family was finally complete. They were happy, but fate, it seemed, had one more cruel twist in store. One rainy September evening, as Leo was driving his truck home after a long day in the fields, he was tired. At a rural railroad crossing, his vigilance lapsed for just a fraction of a second. He didn't see the flashing lights, didn't hear the warning bells, until it was too late. The freight train hit the truck with the force of a battering ram. Leo survived. That was the first miracle. But the second piece of news was a devastating blow. The crash had severely damaged his spine. The doctors were blunt. He would likely never walk again. Chloe's world, so carefully and lovingly rebuilt, shattered once more. She spent her days and nights at his bedside, watching the strong, vibrant man she loved lie motionless, his spirit dimmed by pain and despair. The doctors mentioned a highly specialized, experimental surgery, a slim chance offered by a clinic in New York. But the cost was astronomical, a figure so large it was laughable. It was a sum they could never hope to afford, a cure that was hopelessly out of reach. One evening, as Chloe was sorting through a mountain of medical bills, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was professional and detached. It was a lawyer from a prestigious firm in Chicago. He said he was the executor of an estate belonging to a man named David Harrison, a wealthy industrialist who had recently passed away. Chloe was about to hang up, assuming it was a scam, when the lawyer said something that made her stop breathing. "Mr. Harrison's only son, Michael, died several years ago," the lawyer explained. "Before he died, he fathered a child. We've spent the better part of a year searching. Ma'am, we believe your son, Noah, is David Harrison's sole heir and grandson." The news was so preposterous, so utterly unbelievable, that Chloe's first reaction was to laugh. Noah's biological mother was a troubled local woman who had lost her parental rights. There was no millionaire in his history, but the lawyer was persistent. He explained that Michael Harrison had a brief, undocumented relationship with Noah's mother when she had worked for a time in Chicago. A DNA test would be required, of course, but the evidence they had compiled was compelling. Suddenly, the impossible surgery for Leo didn't seem so impossible anymore. It felt like a lifeline, a ray of hope in the darkest of times. With a mixture of trepidation and desperate optimism, Chloe agreed to travel to Chicago with Noah to meet the lawyer and provide the necessary samples for the test. On a cookie, when a familiar voice sent a jolt of pure ice through her veins. "Chloe! I can't believe it." She looked up, and her heart stopped. Standing before her was Julian Vance. He looked older, more tired, but he still possessed the same predatory confidence. He was the ghost of a past she had buried long ago. His eyes, however, weren't on her. They were fixed on Noah, a strange, calculating expression on his face. He was doing the math, counting the years. A slow, triumphant smile spread across his lips. "He has my eyes," Julian said, his voice a low, possessive murmur. "So you didn't lose the baby after all. You ran, and you hid my son from me." Chloe felt a surge of cold fury. "He is not your son," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "You need to leave now." But Julian ignored her, his gaze locked on Noah. The boy, sensing the tension, looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. "I'm your father's old friend," Julian said to Noah, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "We have a lot to talk about." Chloe grabbed Noah's hand, threw some money on the table, and pulled her son out of the cafe, Julian's smug, confident smile burning into her back. The past wasn't buried. It had found her. The next few days were a blur of anxiety. The DNA test results for Noah's inheritance came back. It was a match. Noah was, indeed, the heir to a fortune. Chloe immediately contacted the surgical centre in New York, the funds now secured, and began making arrangements for Leo's transfer. But a dark cloud hung over their good fortune. Julian began calling. He left messages, alternating between threats and pleas. He had hired private investigators, learned about Leo's accident, their financial struggles. "You can't give my son the life he deserves," he sneered in one message. "I'll take you to court. I have the best lawyers. You will lose. I will get my son back." His threats were terrifying, but Chloe was no longer the scared, naive girl who had fled New York. She was a wife and a mother, and she would fight with every fibre of her being to protect her family. She knew Julian was building a legal case based on a lie, but a custody battle would be draining, public, and traumatic for Noah. She needed to end this. The day before they were scheduled to transport Leo, she agreed to meet Julian one last time in a public park. He arrived with Serena, who looked at Chloe with the same cold disdain as all those years ago. "It's over, Chloe," Julian said, his tone final. "Sign the papers, give me my son, and we will make sure you and your invalid husband are taken care of." Chloe looked him straight in the eye, a calm resolve settling over her. "You want to know the truth, Julian? I will tell you, just so you will leave my family alone forever." She took a deep breath. "I was pregnant with your child. That is true. But I lost him. I had a miscarriage on a train, running from you. The stress, the fear. You killed him." Julian's confident smirk faltered. "You're lying," he stammered. "The timeline, the boy's age." "His name is Noah," Chloe cut in, her voice like steel. "And he is my son. But he is not your son. He is adopted. If you take me to court, your high-priced lawyers will discover that very quickly. The world will discover it. You will become a laughingstock, the powerful man who tried to steal a child that was never his. Now, are you going to leave us alone?" For the first time in his life, Julian Vance was speechless. The truth, so simple and undeniable, had completely disarmed him. He stared at her, then at Serena, whose perfect facade had finally cracked, revealing a flicker of desperation and defeat. Without another word, they turned and walked away. Chloe watched them go, feeling the last chains of her past fall away. She was finally completely free. The next year was dedicated to Leo's recovery. The surgery in New York was a success, followed by months of grueling physical therapy. Chloe and Noah were by his side every step of the way. The day he took his first unaided steps was the happiest day of their lives. They decided not to return to the small farm. Noah's inheritance afforded them new opportunities. They settled in a quiet suburb outside of Chicago, where Noah could attend a great school, and Leo, now fully recovered, started a successful business consulting for agricultural companies. They were a normal family, their extraordinary past a secret they held close. Noah knew he was adopted, and that a man he never met had left him a trust fund that helped his dad get better. For now, that was enough. They would tell him the whole story one day, when he was old enough to understand. They were confident that the truth would never change the love that bound them together. One crisp spring morning, about 2 years after Leo's surgery, Chloe woke up feeling dizzy and nauseous. A familiar, long-forgotten feeling. A cautious hope flooded in her chest. She took a home pregnancy test, her hands trembling as she waited. She stared at the 2 pink lines, and tears of pure, unadulterated joy streamed down her face. That evening, she sat Leo and Noah down on the couch. "I have some news," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She held up the positive test. Noah, now a bright 10-year-old, looked at it, then at his parents, his face breaking into a wide grin. "Finally, why!" he exclaimed. "I was getting tired of being an only child." Leo wrapped his arms around her, his own eyes shining with tears. He kissed her gently, a kiss filled with years of shared struggles, unwavering love, and a future that was suddenly brighter than they had ever dared to dream. They had weathered every storm, faced down every demon from the past, and built a family on a foundation of unshakable love. As Chloe looked at her husband and her son, with a new life stirring inside her, she knew that true wealth had nothing to do with money or power. It was this perfect, hard-won, beautiful moment. Her fairy tale hadn't started in a New York skyscraper. It had started on a train heading west, with an act of kindness from a stranger, and had been built piece by piece into a love story for the ages. In the end, Chloe's journey, which began in an act of horrifying betrayal, led her to a love and a family more real than anything she could have imagined. She found her strength not in revenge, but in building a new life, brick by loving brick. Leah's recovery and the miracle of their new baby were the final chapters in a long and difficult story, proving that even after the darkest nights, the sun will rise again. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe for more powerful tales, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment in your life where a terrible ending turned out to be a brand new beginning?